If you don't learn from history, you're destined to repeat it. We see this in many ways across human history, whether it be in mass extinctions in wildlife, or governmental expenditures, or in things in society as a whole. The first point we'll talk about is mass extinctions. So mass extinctions occur when more than 75% of all species on Earth cease to exist. The way this is classified is in a geological period. So if 75% of all animals, species go extinct in a geological period which is classified as less than 2.8 million years, according to history.howstuffworks.com, then that is a mass extinction. So this has happened 5 times in the last 500 million years. But in more recent times, because of mass habitat loss and lack of change in climate change, it is said by scientists that we are on the verge of a 6th. In more recent times, as I've stated, we're on the verge of a 6th, and that would mean that we are moving at a 3 to 12 times faster rate than we ever have in history of extinction with species. This gives us approximately 3 to 22 centuries to curve this, but on the track we're on right now, it's looking like we're going to get a 6th, which will be bigger and faster than any mass extinction in history. The second point talks about school violence. So school violence seems like it's a very recent thing, and it's a very recent problem in the last decade, but in fact, the most deadly example of school violence is no time recent. It happened almost a century ago in Bath, Michigan, when a planned explosive was set off in a school, killing 45 students and faculty members. Since then, small things have been done, like the Brady Bill in the 1980s under the Reagan administration to put a hold on assault weapons and weapons in general. But that wasn't permanent, so they've come back. And also with bump stock bans and campus carry bills, among other things, that were put in place in Florida following Parkland. But even with this, it is a very common occurrence, and it's going to continue to happen until the majority of people learn from history and figure out what works. All of this, what I just stated, comes from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and from WFSU Public Media. Third point focuses on economic crashes. So most recently happening in 2020 with COVID, and pretty much the explosion of the economy in a not good way. Economic crashes have become a far too common occurrence, with 3 happening in the last century, 3 major ones happening in the last century. Other examples include the Great Recession in 2007 with the crashing of the housing market, and the Great Depression, as we all know, in the 1930s, leading into World War II. So we see many similarities between these, more specifically the recession and the depression are the 2 examples I'm using. Both of them include periods of prosperity and mass financial well-being in the country leading into them. They also include banks experimenting with new ways to do business, and prices exceeding what something is actually worth, which causes asset bubbles. And as we've all heard in history class, those asset bubbles tend to pop, causing bad news for the economy and for the financial market. More specifically, in the recession of 2007, as I've stated with the housing market, it was caused by the bursting of the housing market, which wreaked havoc on the global economy as a whole. In these mentioned instances, the effects include a spike in unemployment, homelessness, and drives poverty rates up dramatically, which leaves the economy in shambles and leaves whatever president and government that is in place to have a major issue on its hands and a major problem to fix. The fourth point is a very recent one, which is war in Europe potentially going global. So Russia, as we all know, has recently claimed that Ukraine is its own territory due to the amount of Russians living in the country. Ukraine obviously says this isn't true and that they're an independent nation. This is eerily similar to what German Prime Minister Adolf Hitler said almost a century ago after taking power. It's the practice of basically saying that this person is the enemy, these are the people we need to get, this is our territory, making an enemy and making everybody mad when a country is not doing well. And it's the same thing that's happening today. Back then, this led to a war in Europe with Austria and with, among other nations like Poland, that Germany was invading and saying that it was its own territory. And we were starting to see that with Russia as they are continuing to try and take Ukraine. This is because Ukraine wanted to join NATO, which is a global alliance of many of the first world countries, including the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, France, Italy, many of the first world countries we see around the world. This would give a lot more protection for Ukraine, meaning that an attack on them or any NATO nation would be an attack on all of them, and would leave Russia in a very, very bad spot. So yeah, in conclusion, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. We see this in the examples I've given today, with 5 and potentially a sixth occurrence of mass extinction, to the constant school violence in the last century, all the way to several major economic crashes in the last century. All of the points mentioned today reflect my thesis, which if you don't learn history, you're doomed to repeat it. And this just shows us that we must learn from our past mistakes. Thank you.